American Bicyclists, and today I am going to be presenting our recent report about integrating equity in bike advocacy. And we are going to go ahead and take questions during the presentation. I'm going to stop after each section in the report that I go through and check with my colleague Liz Murphy to see if we have questions, and then we can also do Q&A at the end. So feel free to type in your question in the chat box. So let me make sure that I am not blocking the view of the report here with my control panel. You can see the screen okay? Okay, great. So this is the report that we released last month, and it is our first review of first kind of sharing out of the process that we've been developing internally to see how we can tweak programs within the league to reach more audiences. And it provides sort of our starting points, timeline, you know, where this idea came from, how it's been developing, and we're hoping that by sharing this with people as we're still in progress, we're very much not done with this equity process yet. We're hoping that by sharing it in progress, we'll help other bike organizations figure out how to get started with this, and also, you know, share out some of the things we've learned with whatever bumps in the road we've encountered. So let's see. We start with just kind of a note from Andy Clark, our president, about how the equity work fits in with our larger direction as an organization. And then there's an introduction from me that is tying the report in with some of the other equity-related materials we've released, such as the report from last year called The New Majority, Pedaling Towards Equity. And I give an overview of what's in the report. And then we have some objectives for the equity initiative and what we are hoping to accomplish by going through this internal equity assessment process. And those objectives are to transform the organization's strategic plan and programming so that we support equitable bike outcomes that include diverse users. We want to create an inclusive work environment that promotes equitable practices and improves organizational effectiveness. And we want to establish organizational structures that support meeting those first two objectives so that this just kind of gets baked into what we do as an organization moving forward. And then, of course, sharing our process as we develop it. So far, I'll get into the timeline after the key findings section, but so far our key is that an emphasis on integration of the loan equity program has really allowed us to review each program. And so because this has been going on with our own internal push to be seeing how we can make our programs work together more clearly, both you know, in our day work in the organization and how we're sharing things out with wider audiences, having this opportunity to review how each program reaches a big group of people or how it's limited in its reach has allowed us to promote cross-pollination across our areas of focus. And we have kind of had new ideas for projects develop as we've moved along going through the program review. And so we are suggesting that an equity, diversity, and inclusion focus can be a great driver of innovation within an organizational structure. Because it gives you an opportunity to just kind of check everything out and see what connects to what and where you can strengthen connections and where things can be brought together to really build something bigger out of what you've already got going on. Some other findings that we have come up with are that it's important to include all of your organizational stakeholders in developing a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And kind of use, in the report, I use the shorthand EDI to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. So when you see that, that's what that means. We've found it's really important to include in developing this commitment, even if this leads to some awkward conversations, or if people feel like they're not, they're not the right people to be taking on an equity focus, or they don't know what the terms mean, or this somehow this is can lead to people feeling a little outside of their comfort zone. But we've found that that's a productive space to be in. And if you can support your staff, your board, all your stakeholders in kind of being in that word space together and then working beyond there, you're really going to be on your way to sustainable change. So kind of related to that is engage staff. And what we did, we've kind of used a model of doing staff training around equity through assessing programs, because our staff are totally experts in what they do. And so for me, as a newcomer to the organization, when I started this process, I needed to just learn about all of the ins and outs of league programs. And so I got to have a lot of conversations with my colleagues about equity, diversity, and inclusion through the lens of what they did on a day-to-day basis with their program. So engaging staff in their kind of space of know-how, I think, is really important. Additionally, we found that even if you're getting started with an EDI process before you have funding, so maybe you don't have the funding to have an equity initiative manager, like me, in your organization, you still can start having these conversations, start formulating where equity can kind of lead the organization in the future. But it's really important to have a team that is thinking together about this stuff, and get it out as much as possible into the kind of shared organizational space, but also have some accountability in terms of who's on that leading team. Another thing that we have found is that it's really great to be thinking with some peer organizations. We've been able to have some great conversations with staff and board members from the Community Cycling Center in Portland, Bike East Bay in Oakland, Bike Easy in New Orleans, the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition, and the Bicycle Transportation Alliance in Portland. And being able to talk to organizations that have similar work and have similar kinds of staff positions to us has helped us see, both how we can be sharing out what we're doing and what some common problems are that a lot of other organizations are facing. And finally, if you are working with a consultant like we've worked with Keta Gonzalez, who is a consultant with the Center for Diversity and the Environment located in Portland. It is a good idea to integrate your education and training, any kind of workshops or special training that you do with staff alongside the strategic planning process, so that you're encouraging people to not just be acquiring maybe a new skill set in terms of familiarity with the vocabulary and the cross-cultural work that goes along with equity, diversity, and inclusion, but also how that new skill set is going to strengthen the work of the organization moving forward. So kind of keeping the strategic planning and the training in the same conversation. So I'm going to pause now and see if we have any questions yet, or if we're good to move on. We're good? Okay. So another thing we included in the report was a kind of timeline. This is partially because I'm an anthropologist and just absolutely love oral history and love learning about the origins of new ideas. And so I've been curious about, where did this equity initiative come from? And I've known about it since early 2013, when I became an Equity Advisory Council member with the League. But since I stepped into this staff role that I have now, I've learned more about kind of going back, where did this first come from? And so in March 2010, things kind of came to the surface in a more visible way at the National Bike Summit, where there were conversations about the need for more spaces that focus on diversity in the bike movement. And that event actually spurred some interesting work that happened outside of the league, including what became the Youth Bike Summit getting formed, that network, and United Cycling Voices, which is a group of bike advocates who are people of color who think together about how to strategize for more equitable representation in bicycling. So that was in March 2010. So that kind of got the conversation started, and things didn't really move forward significantly within the league until September 2012, when the organization hosted the National Women's Bicycling Summit in Long Beach, California, at the tail end of the Pro Walk Pro Bike conference. And there were some discussions about diversity in bicycling that were included as part of the agenda there. And some staff and board members started talking about how they could keep that going, because they had a lot of good responses to having those conversations. And so that's when things really got, I think the idea got planted here that the league could be a space in which to have these conversations, instead of it being a kind of joining the conversation, or maybe having a once a year discussion around diversity. Maybe there could be some kind of ongoing effort to expand and speed up the momentum of this stuff within the bike movement. So in November 2012, the board approved some initial goals related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including having this gathering of bike equity leaders at the National Bike Summit the following March. In January 2013, the first staff member to be focused on equity started in the position of equity fellow. That was Hamza Sani, and there is a cool picture of Hamza down at the bottom of this page here. He's well known for his fashion skills in addition to his equity leadership. And so Hamza started being the equity fellow January 2013, and then Hamza and Carolyn Shapansky, the director of communications here, worked together with the board member, Allison Hill Graves, to create the Equity Advisory Council, where they kind of just brainstormed who are some really great people to have in the room to set an agenda for what equity could look like within the league, for league programs based on what they knew about league programs, and for the bike movement, just kind of starting to vision around this stuff. So I was one of those people. So now the timeline is more stuff that was in my scope of experience. So in May 2013, the New Majority Pedaling Towards Equity report was released, and that was something that Hamza and Carolyn worked very closely on to give a lot of statistic about the demographic shift that we're seeing overall in the United States, but also how this is happening in bicycling. And it was the first big move to try and challenge the idea that bicycling is a homogenous practice, or that there's not already a lot of diversity in bicycling today. Actually, there is. And so what we get to do as bike equity advocates is work on getting more voices to the table, but those voices are already out there, and it's more of an organizing effort than anything else. The same time, in the spring 2013, the organization applied for funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and that ended up being really key to continuing the that summer, EAC member Devlin Chen did some field work in New York to develop some recommendations for how to engage with youth in bicycle advocacy. In August of last year, the organization secured the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funding for the Equity Initiative. So that's what led to me being hired as Equity Initiative Manager. They had the funding to do that through RWJF. And in October, in addition to being able to hire an Equity Initiative Manager, the organization at the board level started working, or started drafting a new mission and vision that furthers the organizational commitment to diversity as a growth strategy. And we're going to revisit that later. I think I should probably speed up this timeline. I'm giving too much detail. Oh my gosh. So In November of last year, the EAC had another meeting. We continued to work on coming up with, what are the gaps right now in bike advocacy? What could we innovate to close those gaps? And ideas there. The report on youth engagement that Devlin Chen had written was released last November. And I started working here, just digging into trying to figure out what the heck it was going to look like to do an internal equity assessment, which was one of the deliverables that we clearly stated we were going to provide in exchange for the funding from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So doing this internal equity transformation change process, something that we needed to figure out. So I started meeting with staff members here. We started talking to our consultant, Keta Gonzalez from the Center for Diversity in the Environment, and I created an called the Bike Equity Network to get more people connected to this conversation so that we can have a place to ask questions, send information, and start to do some knowledge sharing around bike equity at a kind of more national scale. So let's see, for those of you who attended the summit this past March, you probably noticed that there was a bigger kind of focus on inclusion and having conversations about equity throughout the summit. We also got to have an address from U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony, where he spoke a lot about the role bicycling can play in connecting low-income families to opportunities, and the whole ladder opportunity idea connecting with bicycling is something that we've been hearing about more and more. So we continue to move forward within the organization post-summit on having our own training for staff, and that was a 2-day kind of intensive space, and we've got something from that that training that is in the appendix of the report here that I'll get to. And that's what really led to what we're now presenting in this report in terms of what our plan is, program by program, for the organization to get to being more of a driver of equity. And yeah, that's enough from the timeline. Let's see if people have been bored to tears. Do we have any questions now? Okay, we're good. So one thing that we have been very focused on, and this was something that Keta couldn't emphasize enough when she came to work with us in March on our staff training and giving us some coaching around how to get this equity thing really integrate our organizational structure. She just had us, really thinking about how we could bring this work together with the review of our strategic plan that was happening at the board level. And so started thinking about ways that where was equity resonating already in the direction the organization was going, and where could we kind of shore that up? Where did we need to suggest some changed language, things like that. So the board had already put together a proposed new mission and vision that are very inclusive of this kind of equity focus. And so we've got those included in the report here. We've got our belief statement, which is bicycling brings people together. When more people ride bikes, life is better for everyone. Communities are safer, stronger, and better connected. And our nation is healthier, economically stronger, environmentally cleaner, and more energy independent. Our vision is a nation where everyone recognizes and enjoys the many benefits and opportunities of bicycling. And our mission is to lead the movement to create a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. As leaders, our commitment is to listen and learn, define standards, and share best practices to engage diverse communities and build a powerful, unified voice for change. So these were some pretty strong statements we got from the board about really the work of the league focusing on what it means to create a more bicycle-friendly America for everyone. And so this kind of sets the groundwork for us figuring out what that means, figuring out, where have only certain communities been able to benefit from bicycling? What are the reasons, and what can we do, most importantly, what moving forward to ensure that the policy work that we do, the recommendations we have for planners and advocates, the programs that we are, giving seed funding to in terms of community organizing, how can we make sure that across the board, all of these things are supporting the idea that bicycling is for everyone, and really breaking through the limitations that the bike movement has had for many years in terms of bicycling being seen as a special interest. So this is great, exciting stuff. It was great to have this mission and vision to work from. So this is where we see a strong commitment to equity in the organization's strategic plan. So going from a strategic plan to making all this cool, highfalutin language into a reality at an organizational level has been an ongoing process. And we're working on that now. We have a set of programmatic actions that we have set out for ourselves. But yeah, we're still in the process of really translating the strategic plan and vision for the organization into something that we are making happen through our programs. So I'll pause to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, we have a one here from Sarah, taking a step back ever so slightly. Adonia, can you share a little bit more information about the assessment component?
Yeah, the assessment component. Um, we basically, I started kind of in a what is the scatterbrained, started in a scatterbrained way on that aspect of this, which was just to try and learn as much as I could about the kind of day-to-day, what means what at the league, what do the programs see as their primary audience focus, what do they see as problems, what had staff already identified as clear problem areas in terms of not being able to reach certain populations. So I started that pretty much as soon as I got to the league, and then that ended up having a few iterations that got more focused. So from having one-on-one conversations with staff in December to having more targeted conversations that included not just me, but also our communications team and our membership director, so that we could all talk about the theme of engagement. So how are programs engaging with league members or groups beyond that? And getting to sit in on those conversations, having already gotten kind of a groundwork in what it was that the organization was doing and what staff saw their programs doing, allowed me to get a better sense of where we were. And so then, working with Keta, I was able to come up with this structure that is shown here on the page under programmatic actions. So we were getting a feel for what our current state was, like where were we as an organization. And what Keta recommended for us was to have the current state, come up with what our goal state, like what is our vision for where that program could be, and then figure out how to bridge the gap, where the actions that we needed to get from the current state to the goal state. So I would say that the assessment process was really coming up with this current state was. And this was actually a somewhat complicated process, but there was a lot of information to get through in terms of our programs here, because we of work as an organization covering a lot of areas. And so for a newcomer to join the organization and then be kind of at the helm of the internal equity assessment process made a really steep learning curve in terms of knowing the lingo and knowing where what things people had already tried in the past, and trying to figure out what aspects of the programs were artifacts of other versions of the program had gone in the past. And So anyway, long story short, the assessment was a lot of conversations, a lot of asking questions of staff, and then coming up sort of after that with this model for documenting what our current state was from those conversations and working with staff then to define what a goal state would be. Um, so I hope that answers the question. Do we have any more questions before we go on?
Yeah, we have one more here from Sarah. What were there specific discussions about what EDI meant to the league? Did you define a focus population or populations so that you would know whether you were moving forward with appropriate solutions?
Yes, so to answer the last part of that first, the populations that are targeted through the initiative were defined when we went through our process with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to see kind of where this program could go with their funding, and we decided to focus on communities of color and youth. That's pretty broad. And we do already have a women bike program here at the league that had been running successfully for a while before the equity initiative got going. But yeah, so those are our target populations. And let's see, what was the other part of the question? Oh yes, how do we define equity here? So when I got started, um, we were talking about equity largely as we tended to use it as a kind of catch-all, an umbrella term, and I've heard a lot of other organizations do that too. And I think that in some ways that can be useful because it allows us to kind of put everything that has to do with going beyond the endemic audience or going beyond the usual suspects into a shared category. But it can also get confusing when you don't have clarity on what terms you're using. So we did we did some definition work with the Equity Advisory Council. You can find on our website the Equity Advisory Council worked as a group to come up with some definitions of equity, diversity, and inclusion based on their experiences as bike advocates who were also familiar or part of, categories of women, communities of color, and youth. So that was something that helped sharing those definitions with staff. But we really didn't hone our organizational definitions of this stuff until our staff training and actually skipping ahead to the end of the report here, you can see that one of the things that we did as part of that training was asked staff to kind of define what they thought the league was doing with this equity initiative, and we got responses that were pretty interesting in terms of, people had a kind of intuited idea of what they thought this equity thing was about. And so I would say that our organizational definition of equity, we try to keep it a little loose in terms of not kind of foreclosing at this point in time what direction we think this work is going to go, but broadly speaking, it has to do with outcomes, focusing on how our work contributes to equitable outcomes in terms of who has access to bicycling, what kind of facilities they're using, ensuring that the work that we're doing is not somehow making it more difficult for some populations to bike. So that is the kind of overall idea of equity that we're working with is being outcomes focused. More questions?
We have one more here. Michael is curious about the question of increasing professional staff members of color at the league and other advocacy organizations. Can you speak a little bit more to the importance of that in general?
I that is a very complex issue that we've actually, I would say, uh, we've had some conversations internally and with our board's equity task force, which is kind of the body on the board that is guiding this stuff around. We should be coming up with an affirmative action plan so that we can actually take steps to preference, do preferential hiring. And it's been kind of we've decided that that's an awkward fit for a small organization. And the reality is that most bicycle organizations are pretty small organizations. So it's actually, so for me, the complexity to the issue comes in with the the need to not create more discomfort and awkwardness, both for the newcomer to the organization and the people who are working at an organization, if you want to do preferential hiring. And so what we have focused on here is really starting to be transparent about what skill sets we want to have at the organization, and including that in our application processes, and in our descriptions of new positions that are available, making it very clear in our language what the skill sets we want to have. We want to have to kind of help guide the future of the organization, we want to have people who are comfortable working in multiple settings. We want to have people who are used to, or have experience with building coalitions across different interest areas. And there are a number of in my mind, there are a number of ways in which a project like that, of focusing on skill sets and being very transparent about what experience you want someone to bring to the organization, and the idea that you're going to increase the number of people of color working in your organization. So to summarize all that, long story short, the board has not taken steps here to create an affirmative action plan. It's something we've discussed, that this should continue to be the bike equity conversation, and I totally welcome any thoughts people have on that, or examples that they've seen working in other contexts. All right, so that's all the questions we have for now. So let's do some review of what our actual programmatic actions are. So as I said earlier, we came up with this structure where we map out this spreadsheet, where we map out our current state of a program, the goal state, and then what are the actions that we are putting into staff work plans that are going to help us move from point A to point B. And this was really, I don't know how how exciting it comes across. But to me, to the person who was trying to figure out how the heck do we do this, integrating our focus on equity with just running the organization, this innovation we came up with Keta, our consultant, and Jacob Wolf Barnett, our chief operating officer here, to have these actions we'd identified get built into staff work plans was like, it was like a eureka moment where we went, wow, this is it right here. This is how you integrate your equity commitment. We just put it on the staff to-do list. And the way that we develop staff work plans here is very interactive between staff and the program directors or supervisors, so people have a really clear understanding of what they're working towards, and there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that there's buy-in, so that staff don't feel like they're getting more on their plate than they can handle, and also that they get to have a say in the direction their program is going. So we included the equity, diversity, and inclusion actions in that work plan development process. This happened this spring. So now we've kind of defined what the actions are that we're going to be monitoring through the end of 2014. Then we're going to be able to review at the end of the year in our organizational report on 2014 where we got, what worked, what didn't work, what do we still have to do. And yeah, so I've included in the report, I don't know that I want to go over it in this webinar program by program what the actions are, but maybe I'll give an overview of LEAG programs for folks who aren't familiar with them. So program number one, which is really our big overarching, incorporates many aspects of our organization, the Bicycle Friendly America program. Our BFA staff evaluate the efforts of cities, businesses, universities to make bicycling an option for more people. We do this through application processes, basically surveys that we have point people fill out, and then we evaluate those. We do site visits. We give people reviews of the progress they've made. And some of you may be most familiar with the league through the rating system that we do through Bicycle Friendly America. We do bronze, silver, gold, platinum, or diamond levels of bicycle friendliness. So you might live in a city that has a silver level of bike friendliness, or if you're one of the lucky few, platinum level. So what's listed in the report here are the specific actions that we identified with our Bicycle Friendly America program staff that will kind of make sure that those programs and the audiences we reach through those programs are going to have less barriers to participation based around differences out there. Next, we have our education program, which if you're not familiar with the league BFA, you might be familiar with the league through our LCI program. The league cycling instructor we train people to be professional bike educators, and we set the standards for smart cycling. And our materials are then used in these educational programs. This was one of the first programs to kind of come up when we started to do the equity assessment because of the translation issue. So putting out educational materials, but they're only available in English. That was for us a very clear, like, okay, well, here's something we can do very clearly to get our programs to more people. Let's make our official materials available in some other very commonly spoken languages. So that is on our to-do list for education. It's going to some other programs. We do federal policy as a national organization based here in DC, and our focus there with equity, diversity, and inclusion has been working on involving new allies in our lobbying efforts and staying engaged with the strategy building that happens with a group based here in DC called the Transportation Equity Caucus, which is a really amazing coalition of transportation, labor, environmental groups that are all working on making sure that the legislation they're proposing or supporting has a clear commitment to equity built in. Another program that we have is the National Bike Summit, which is our annual conference that brings hundreds of bike advocates from around the country to DC for workshops and a day of lobbying on Capitol Hill. So we've come up with some clear ways forward that we can develop more diversity in who is presenting at the summit and what topics are covered. State and local policy, in addition to our federal policy work, we have some great staff doing a lot of innovative work to connect our advocacy partners around the country with financing opportunities and ways to make communities more bike friendly. So we came up with some ways to bring EDI into that program. The National Bike Challenge is an online network where people and groups can compete by logging miles. It's in its third year, and we're still kind of building that out and figuring out how to make sure that it becomes a way for more folks to get familiar with the league. Women Bike, I mentioned earlier, is an outreach program that predates the Equity Initiative by a little bit, and it has had the really cool opportunity to do mini grants to a number of groups around the country to kind of help come up with new ideas about how to engage women in bicycling. And that's been a really fun program to work with. It really crosses over with the Equity Initiative in a lot of ways. We've also thought about how equity, diversity, and inclusion fit in with the fact that we're a membership organization. So how do we both promote the idea of membership to membership in the league to new audiences, and how do we ensure that the way we communicate with our members includes different perspectives. So I'll pause there, see if we have questions, and then get to the tail end of it here.
We have a couple of questions about some of the league's specific programs. A question from Elizabeth wondering if there's a way the league may be able to develop and promote more diversity and inclusion within the LCI and TS 101 education programs. So I guess talking more a little bit about EDI within our education program.
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, that is a great question, and that's something that I haven't been able to kind of dig into that specific area. Right now, my main focus, time-wise, has been on creating a bike equity toolkit that we're going to be releasing in September. But what we have planned for the education program is convening a group of LCIs or other educators who maybe aren't using the league curriculum but are doing bike education, who are working with populations that are not English speaking. So seeing what we can learn both in terms of translation of materials, but then also on the cultural side, what are the kind of norms or expectations that our LCIs are communicating that we're not thinking about right now that might actually be making the education program less easy to access, less easy to digest, or less relevant to people who are biking in different parts of the country. So that is on the to-do list, but if Elizabeth wants to participate in that, get in touch, because basically the first step for that is going to be doing some focus groups, and having people who are already familiar with the LCI curriculum will be really valuable through that process. Any other questions? Any other questions?
We've got one more here from Karen who's curious about the inclusion of older adults in our definition of EDI.
That is a valid point of oversight, that we have not done anything to focus on that population specifically. Another area that we have had to be reminded numerous times, actually, that we should be thinking about our individual disabilities who are biking or are having to use streets with new bike infrastructure on them that might not have been designed with their needs in mind. So those are two different populations that I think deserve more attention in terms of whose needs we need to be including in the picture that we're not connecting with right now. But as of now, nope, we have not done work around older adults and particular bike issues that they face. But really open to ideas, so thanks for bringing it up, and I'm going to keep that in mind for some future reporting that we can do. Other questions? Okay, let's get to the tail end of the report. So the key lesson learned through our process so far is that an equity assessment should be timed to coincide with a strategic plan review. This will ensure that you've integrated your organization's commitment rather than tacked on a standalone program. We had a really fortunate coincidence of getting the funding to really dig into this equity work at the same time that the organization was focusing on just kind of rebuilding itself from the inside out, in terms of what are our systems of accountability, what are our program titles, a lot of stuff that's been under review at the league since I started here, and that has made integrating the findings of equity assessment much more clear. It's made it how to do that, because when everything's getting, it's like, yeah, we'll rebuild this part too. Not something that was really planned. Just a neat coincidence. So we definitely recommend that other organizations who are digging into this work think about intentionally having those things go together. Let's see, other lessons. Many changes happening at the organization, including a rebranding process. We guess I shouldn't say we because I wasn't here yet, but the initial not engaging the whole staff that fully because people were really busy with other stuff. People were, I think a lot of us know what it's like to be at a small nonprofit where you're just trying to do a million things. It wasn't until really our staff training in March that we really got all hands on deck in terms of everybody thinking together about this stuff. And in retrospect, I think it could have been good to have something like that happen a little further back. And we're still actually determining what kind of training or learning process around equity is going to make sense for our board. And we're still in the process of making sure that everyone feels included in that we're doing. I think that's been, I don't really state it that clear here, but one of the major lessons that I've learned through this process is that inclusion can sound scary because we don't actually get to have a lot of experiences in truly inclusive environments in this country at this point in time. And so for lots of folks, when they hear inclusion, what they think about is a certain group being excluded. So sometimes I've had people feel kind of threatened around the idea of promoting the voices of women and people of color because the message they hear in that somehow is now we're going to exclude white men. And it's been really important, I've learned, to make sure that the message of inclusion is getting through. And the best way to do that is to include your own people in moving forward on this stuff. And that can include some disagreement, that can include people being at different starting points, but it's really kind of in the organization's best interest to figure out what support needs to happen so that you can just do this work out in the open, transparently, bringing people along, rather than having it be something that develops kind of in a corner because you don't really want to rock boat too much. Um, just having everyone along for the ride as early as possible is a pretty good idea. And then the final lesson here that we're still working on is are we going to be ready when push comes to shove? Are we going to be really able to represent a very inclusive idea of bicycling? We have not fully figured out yet, you know, if there needs to be a a I don't think I'm being very clear here. Let me back up a bit. So as someone who came into this work without much of a background in some of the areas that the organization works, my background is more in community organizing around bicycling and looking at bike culture issues. I was not familiar with some planning and policy work that happens in the organization. So I haven't always known uh, the best equity recommendation for those areas that I'm newer to right off the bat. And so it's taken a lot of collaboration with other staff to identify what equity is going to mean in those different areas. We're still in the process of really knowing how to communicate this work with the new audiences that we'd like to be reaching, such as people who are focused on health equity or in the public health field. And so recently I got to go to a conference and share this work with who are funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Childhood Obesity Prevention Program, and was reminded that people working in bicycling have a lot of we have a lot of work to do around changing our messaging so that people are on the same page with us on what we have in mind, because we do encounter a lot of stereotypes and a lot of kind of right off the bat, people are assuming things about what we want to do with bikes or who we see riding bikes, that we are going to have to continue to work for some time to correct. So those are things that we're still figuring out. So future plans I've got on the second page up on the screen here. As I said earlier, we're gonna do a report on our progress at the end of this year, and it's going to be a couple of times this year and in early 2015, where we ask our staff to again tell us where they think the equity initiative is going, what they've heard from people that they talk to when they're out representing the league in the field. And we'll be doing a final report to the public about this process next March. And yeah, final thing here is the survey that we had staff do before our staff training. I thought this was a cool thing to include just to show that, we weren't all at the same starting point. And I really appreciated my colleagues' willingness to both share this with the public and also engage at the level they have. I think that you can see a lot of willingness to learn and willingness to not be totally sure where we're going to end up with this process in these responses, and I appreciate that. So I have walked us through this report, and I am ready to take more questions, see what I can make more clear, or what's not here that people were wondering about.
Yeah, I'll just remind people to feel free to type that into the question box in your control panel.
And one thing I haven't really covered in this presentation or really in the space of this report was how this is one component of the equity initiative, and the kind of larger framework for the equity initiative is both doing the internal work, but also creating resources so that more bike advocates can kind of know what they're doing with bike equity, and helping to kind of set the terms for what is going to make sense and be useful going forward. So we will be presenting about this work at the Alliance's Leadership Retreat that's going to happen in Pittsburgh in September, and the Pro Walk Pro Bike Conference that will also be in Pittsburgh in September, and at the Future Bike Conference that the League is organizing as a tail end event to Pro Walk Pro Bike, where we're going to talk about what strengths diversity brings to the bike movement and how we can develop a future vision for bicycling that really draws on strength in difference. So this is one component of a larger framework. We get any questions?
Yeah, we have a question here from Marvin. What is being done to ensure that low-income/diverse communities are not being left out of infrastructure improvements based on perceptions they don't want to bike?
So that question kind of gets to something I was rambling about incoherently toward the end of the presentation here. That is a really, I think that's a very uh, it's a very real problem, and it's a really tough one to talk about. And we are still struggling with figuring out the exact right language to use that is constructive and that also makes it clear that these perception issues are seriously damaging, both in terms of limiting the idea of who should be biking, and making it really difficult actually for bicycling to come across in a positive light, because there has not been, the reason we're doing this initiative is that there has not been a lot of attention across the board in the bike movement in the past to what are the different ideas about transportation that different populations have going on that are tied to a lot of historical trends in urban planning. In my mind, things like redlining and urban renewal and all of these things, white flight, all of these things that differentially affected different populations in this country, and that led to a certain racialization in terms who could move to the suburbs and move to the suburbs, who could move out to those areas where you had to be driving around and who couldn't. There's all of these status and other kinds of messages that people send with how they get around in our streets. And it has been very challenging to figure out how to find positive messaging for bicycling that is also inclusive and doesn't actually perpetuate some of those same divides in terms of who has access to new bike infrastructure projects. So that's very much top of our minds. We are really interested here league in partnering with community economic development organizations and other folks who are kind of on the leading edge of looking at what bicycling can mean in a local economy, what bicycling can mean, again, is this ladders to opportunity idea in terms of getting more people to job opportunities, getting people into spaces where it's easy to make healthy choices in terms of transportation. Figuring out how race and class fit into that framework is something that nobody's really figured out yet, but we are very much hoping to continue to be a part of the conversation and to continue to be a space where we talk about this stuff in the open, knowing that it's difficult and alienating for some people. So I hope that answers that question in some regard.
Great. We had one other question just about where to find the report on the website. So I just wanted to mention quickly, you can find that at bikeleague.org/equity. And then on the left-hand side of the site, if you click on equity reports and resources, it'll be the top report on the page. And you can also see some of the other resources that the League and Adonia have put together over the past months as well.
Any more questions? All right, well, thanks so much for listening in. This webinar is going to be available on our website, and I'm going to send it out to people who weren't able to be here. One thing I'll mention right as we're wrapping is that there is a Bike Equity Network email listserv. I mentioned it earlier during the report. If you're interested in joining that, you can email me, adonia@bikeleague.org, or you can find information about it on our website under the equity page. And that is just a place where people can learn about upcoming events related to bike equity and ask questions, comment on articles that are coming out, things like that. And had some interesting discussions on there since we got it started in December, and everyone's welcome. So thanks so much, and yeah, be in touch if you have questions, and I hope that this can help more folks know that there's not really a right way to do this yet, but we are trying to figure it out, and we're open to feedback. So thanks a lot for listening.